Mornings are better with a warm beverage, even for Latter-day Saints. Meet Postum, the ideal coffee alternative and proud sponsor of This Week in Mormons podcast. Spotted on the coffee aisle at Smith's Grocery or at your local nearby store. Can't locate it? No worries. Order it at postum.com. Explore delicious recipes to tailor your Postum experience. Start your day off right with Postum. Welcome to This Week in Mormons. This is the TWIM Taffy edition, which stands for Tiffany and Friends for You. I am here tonight with one of my friends who also happens to be a longtime listener, Robert Mortensen.
Hello, TWIM family.
Yay, Robert.
Fun to be here.
Welcome to the show. We need to give some background. Whenever I have a new co-host on, I kind of like to give the listeners a little bit of background as to how I am acquainted with them, what their relationship with TWIM is. And so we both grew up in Nampa, which for, those of you who are not Idaho natives, it is a kind of a suburb of Boise now. It's about 20 miles outside of Boise. You are about 10 years younger than me. So we didn't run in the same circles, but we know all of the same people because we grew up in Nampa. Yeah. And you were closer in age to my siblings.
Yeah, your brother's a year older than me, and then Ariane, I think, is a year or two years younger than me. So yes. We were in high school together.
Yes.
And Nampa was a lot smaller. It was only 25,000 people or so. Then now it's well over 100,000. So
Exactly. And my parents knew your parents, and your parents knew my parents. And
I remember your family furniture store.
Yes.
Yeah.
Too funny. So anyway, and you have been a longtime listener of the show. You comment a lot on Facebook. I think you ran into Ariane like in the grocery store or Target or something like that. And was like, I listened to your podcast. And if I recall her telling me, but Tell me, how did you get introduced to TWIM? How did this become in your podcast rotation, so to speak?
Well, honestly, it was because I heard that you and Ariane were hosting. And I was like, there's
please.
That Nampa connection. So I started listening, and I really appreciate it.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Who told you we were hosting?
I don't even remember how it happened, but I heard that you were hosting it.
That's hilarious.
But I really liked Jeff, and Al was kind of phasing out at that time. But I really enjoyed the podcast.
So then it sounds like you've been listening to TWIM as long as Ariane and I have been doing it.
Pretty much.
Okay, well, we actually started in May of 2017. Our first episode was an episode right before Mother's Day. So essentially we could say you are here on the anniversary of the TWIM sisters' debut on the TWIM podcast.
And what an honor to celebrate Mother's Day with you too.
Yes. Well, and I've been kind of excited to have you here on Mother's Day. Ariane and I, as if you have been a longtime listener of the podcast, we have feelings on Mother's Day. We always talk a lot about Mother's Day. And this year I said, this will be interesting to have a male perspective on Mother's Day. So, all right. So before we get into our Mother's Day discussion, I have prepared for you a special beverage tonight. Now, you may recall 2 weeks ago when I recorded with Ariane, I made her try the cocoa flavored Postum. Okay. And she legit at first was like, I don't know about this. And then she tried it and she seriously liked it. In fact, listeners, she liked it so much that she continued to drink it morning and night for the next week. And she's like, I need another bottle of that. Where can I get it? She really just liked it. So
I thought it was supposed to be non-addictive, but it sounds like it is.
For her, it was addictive. Anyway, so when I made it for her, we did the cocoa. We threw coconut creamer in. So it kind of tasted like an Almond Joy. So I told you tonight, I said, okay, if you come to my house to record, we have to cheers and we have to do some Postum. So the combination I made tonight, and we haven't tried this yet, is I did the cocoa and I put in some caramel macchiato coffee creamer to kind of sweeten it up. And so we're going to see how this tastes.
First time Postum drinker here.
What we think of it. Okay.
Oh, very nice. It's a really nice, mild drink. Like I could get behind that.
Yeah. I like it with the caramel I can't even figure out how you pronounce that name. Macchiato, something like that. Yeah, this is really good. And you were telling me, because I had the regular Postum, and you said, "Oh, I want to try the chocolate one," because you're a big hot chocolate connoisseur.
Yeah. If we didn't have the word of wisdom, I'd probably be a crazy coffee drinker. I've been trying all the different kinds, but I'll be a hot chocolate connoisseur. And now this one's added to the list.
Well, I like it because the coffee creamer adds just enough sweetness, but and I said this last week when I recorded with Ariane, but it is not, it's not overly sweet. And that's my beef with hot chocolate, is it's really too overly sweet for me.
Yeah, this is great.
So again, another fun Postum combination. And for those of you listening, Postum is a sponsor of our show. That is why we are trying out fun new Postum combinations, just to see what we get. So I've tried it.
Delicious.
Yeah. I've tried it with 2 different ones. I have a fun one when I record with Ariane. I'm going to record with Ariane at the end of the month, last Friday of the month. And I have a fun one that I'm going to do with Ariane when we record. I'll just tease that right now.
Looking forward to
the combination that we are going to do. So, all right. Well, as I stated earlier, it is Mother's Day weekend. So that is always filled with all sorts of landmines. Yeah. Let's talk about your ward. What does your ward typically do for Mother's Day?
Probably mostly the traditional things. We have some Mother's Day themed talks, which also has potential for landmines. But you have to recognize the pressure that is on a bishopric to organize the sacrament meeting, and hopefully not offend, and then also to get the right type of gift for the mothers.
And you have been a bishop, correct? Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I want to understand this from a bishop's perspective here. Explain it to me, make it make sense.
Well, I just learned by trial and error. So, in a previous bishopric, one time the bishop got them church music CDs.
Okay.
CDs were already on their way out, though.
Everybody was doing digital.
And so that one really fell flat, and I don't think anyone was excited about it. So I tried, one year I just tried those big Costco thick and rich chocolate cakes. 75% of people loved it.
Okay.
But then we had all the gluten-free people, the non-chocolate people, all that. They were really disappointed.
Okay.
So the next year I tried it, Costco chocolate cake, chocolate cheesecake with raspberry. Okay. And then bowls of fruit of all the variety of fruits. Okay. And it seemed to hit the mark. I think we had probably a 97% delighted
success rate. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
But it's a lot of pressure.
That is a lot of pressure.
Because just the chance of failure is just too high.
Yes. So do you have any idea what your ward is doing this year?
We have a brand new bishopric.
Okay, so this should be highly entertaining.
This will be the ultimate test of, do those sustaining votes really matter? We're going to find out this Sunday how they do. We have no idea what they're going to do. So we'll see.
Well, I saw an interesting post on Facebook this week. In fact, I commented on it. It's a gentleman in my stake, and he put this post up on Facebook, and I commented on it. And then, the next thing I know, the post was gone. And I'm like, well, either my comment was offensive, or he was like, oh, this is opening up too many cans of worms. He has to speak in sacrament meeting on Sunday. And so he was asking, he's like, Mother's Day, this is a touchy subject, what should I speak on? And so I pondered that, and this was my response to him. I said, you know what? I said, go delve into the scriptures and look at the women who were in Christ's life. Speak on Mother's Day Sunday about the women in Christ's life, what those women taught him, how he interacted with those women, and focus on the lives of those women that interacted with the Savior, and then invite the sisters in your ward to develop their own personal relationship with the Savior, modeled after those women who were in the Savior's life. That was my advice. I thought that's
great advice.
I don't think anybody can really walk away from that feeling offended. And the Savior had just some amazing women in his life. And we really don't talk about them very much. Everything from, his mother and the things that he learned from his mother and the woman that she was, to, the women who went to find him and found the tomb empty. And everyone in between. So
Yeah,
I don't know. That is just my 2 cents worth on Mother's Day.
Yeah, my sustaining vote on that.
All right. Well, let me talk about what my award does.
Yeah,
because we're going to talk about Mother's Day. And this year, we cannot talk about Mother's Day without talking about Father's Day. So, as listeners know, I am in a Relief Society presidency, and this is our 4th Mother's Day. So, the first year, we just let the ward kind of do the traditional thing that the ward has always done. The ward, for as long as I can remember, until we came to this presidency, the last 10 minutes of Relief Society, we got a man-sized piece of cheesecake with 2 little pie cherries on top. It was not what I wanted for Mother's Day. I did not want a man-sized piece of cheesecake with, I would probably eat 2 bites of it and be fine, but then I feel guilty throwing away the rest of this cheesecake. It's not that I don't love cheesecake. It's just...
You need more fruit topping.
I need more fruit topping, and I don't want a man-sized piece of cheesecake, and I don't want it the last 10 minutes. It kind of felt like, oh, this is what we'd like, and this checks the box, so here you go. So we let that go on for the first year. Second year, I said to my Relief Society presidency, I said, I think we need to take Mother's Day over. I said, I think we need to do what we know our sisters are going to appreciate. And so what we decided to do is we decided to do like a little box lunch. And so second hour, the men would cover primary, Sunday school, all of the other classes so that all the women could come into the gym. We would sit around. We would have this lovely boxed lunch of girly food that usually involved like a chicken salad sandwich, maybe a salad, a little piece of fruit.
On a nice croissant.
Exactly, on a nice croissant. Very girly food. And so we would sit around and just visit and eat our girly food and have a short little message on Mother's Day from the Relief Society presidency. And it has gone over like fantastic with our sisters. Our sisters have absolutely loved it.
And the bishopric was probably grateful you took all that pressure away from
Exactly. The bishopric was grateful we took all the pressure away. And I want to be very clear on this. I am not complaining about that at all because we willingly chose to do this as a presidency for our sisters. So I have no beef with that. That was our choice. So we have a new bishop this year. You know him. You're actually pretty good friends with him.
Yeah. So as well with your Relief Society president.
As well, at one point in time, Robert lived in my ward before I moved into my ward. So he knows a lot of the long-standing people who've been in my ward for a while. So this year, the bishop says, okay, we want to do something similar for the fathers for Father's Day. And I'm like, great, knock yourselves out. You got plenty of men in the ward who can cook. Oh, no. He wants the Relief Society to do Father's Day. And that is where my beef is.
I thought you were teeing that up that all the guys brought their smokers and they were smoking ribs and stuff out in the parking lot.
I would have no problem with that. Wow. You want to smoke your ribs in the parking lot? You want to put on your own party? I got no beef with that. My beef is I have to do Mother's Day. Again, I chose to do Mother's Day. And you want me to do Father's Day too? So I brought this up to my Relief Society president. And I said, this seems inherently unfair. And she said, well, this is an opportunity for us to serve the men. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm not disagreeing with that, but it still seems inherently unfair. We took it over because we didn't like what they were doing. If they don't like our piece of pie, they can throw their own party. And she said, well, then it would just be on their wives, which she's probably not wrong about that. But I'm still a little salty about it, to say the least.
Man, I might have to pull some strings here with your bishop, who's my close friend, and tell him to get out the smokers and let's do a real man lunch.
Well, and it's my husband is the chief smoker for our ward.
Perfect.
And so it's
I'm sure he'd be ready and willing.
I'm just saying. So we have planned breakfast burritos for them. So I think what we're going to do is the day before Father's Day, we're going to get together and assemble some breakfast burritos, and I don't know what else we'll have for them. But anyway,
choice.
that is where I am beefing. I anticipate, because we've been in the Relief Society presidency for about 3.5 years, that I will probably not see another Mother's Day or Father's Day. So I'm like, okay,
this could be the linchpin of the deciding.
I'm like, I can suck it up. Anyway, so that's where I'm beefing. So anyway, any other thoughts on Mother's Day before we move into some fun or rather interesting stories?
Well, I have to share one story about your mom.
This is a treat.
Yeah. So your mom, I think she passed away. I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah, she passed away in 1990. So you would have, because Ariane was about 10 and a half.
Yeah. So I remember her speaking in our ward, and I remember sitting there with my parents. But she was in front of the pulpit talking. So I don't even remember the exact scenario.
Okay.
But her diagnosis was already terminal at that point. And I remember her testifying of Jesus Christ. And it was so powerful that I remember it very clearly to this day.
Wow. Okay, now you're going to make me cry.
Well, I'm already crying. And it was really interesting because as a boy growing up, pretty orthodox.
Yeah.
I think I saw for the first time, I was like, wow, that is a woman leader, and she's my leader.
Wow.
And that she gave a testimony of Christ that I still remember. And so it was sad when we lost her.
Aww.
But she was a great example of a righteous woman, a faithful woman, and a great mother. So
thank you so much for sharing that. I did not know that. I really appreciate that, because when she was giving a lot of those talks, I was in college. So I wasn't around to, hear those talks. I do have one talk. In fact, I need to get it up on Family Search. David Larson transferred it from a video to a USB for me. We had a stake women's conference, and it was about 3 months before she passed, and she was not physically capable of standing up and speaking. And so my dad recorded her, and they played her recorded message. And so I do have that message that I really do cherish. So
yeah, wonderful. Heard the hails.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. So that kind of ties into our next story, or our first story that we're going to talk about, because we are going to talk about one of the women leaders in the church who has been making waves for the last 7 days, so to speak. She didn't intend to make waves. She just made waves. So we are talking about, of course, Camille Johnson. She is the General Relief Society president. And unless you've been hiding under a rock, they have had women's conference going on last week at BYU. And she spoke at women's conference. And one of her talks, she was actually a keynote speaker on Friday. And one of the things that she talked about, the point of her talk is she was saying, children are vital to maintaining civilization, and in God's glorious plan of happiness, the mother of three former corporate lawyers said, the commandment for us to come down and for us to multiply and replenish the earth remains in force. And so she was talking about, do not delay motherhood. Motherhood is a very important thing, and that the church is concerned with some of the declining birth rates. And she also went on in this particular talk to kind of give an example of, look, here's what I did in my life. I chose not to delay motherhood. Well, for those of you who don't know, our listeners who don't know or realize, she is a lawyer, and she went to law school. She was pregnant in law school. I think she gave birth to her boy after she passed the bar exam, and she practiced as a lawyer for a number of years while her children were small. And so she goes on in this talk to talk about how she and her husband kind of juggled his responsibilities, her responsibilities, their family responsibilities, their church responsibilities. And she said that, it was a challenge for them. It was a hectic and chaotic time for them, but they did that. And so then there was a whole Instagram post that she had. In fact, I'll just pull it up really quick here. A whole Instagram post that she had. Let's see if I still have it on here. I will. There we go. Where she talks about the chaos. She said, my husband and I loved and nurtured them. She was referring to her kids while we were both working. It was busy, sometimes hectic. We were stretched and sometimes tired. I supported him. He supported me. Family was and still is our top priority. My husband and I have sought inspiration in these choices and in the timing. It was what we felt impressed to do, and we were trying to let God prevail. it would have been for her generation a bit unusual for her to be doing what she was doing. She's 60 now. I'm 56. So I consider us to kind of essentially be in the same generation, kind of receiving the same messaging growing up.
So raising kids in the 80s and 90s, probably.
Yes. I mean, she probably would have, I assume, started having babies around late 80s. Okay. I was a little delayed because I didn't get married as young as she did. But anyway, so she has this post about, juggling these things. And there ended up being almost 3,000 comments on this post. And there were a lot of women commenting on this post about, when did the church change its stance on working women? How is it okay now to be a working woman? And why aren't they apologizing for all of the things that were said early on about, not being a working mom? And they were specifically referencing statements that President Kimball had made. And there was an article in the Salt Lake Tribune, and President Kimball had made a statement that said, no career approaches in importance of that wife, homemaker, mother, cooking meals, washing dishes, making beds for one's precious husband and children. Come home, wives, to your husbands. Make home a haven for them. Come home to wives, to your children, born and unborn. Then that was subsequently quoted by President Benson in the 80s, and the whole thing about staying home. And so there was a lot of bitterness on these comments. Now, what was really interesting is the first comment on there was by Dallin H. Oaks. And I was when I saw it, I was like, is that really him? Or is this like an account using his name? No, it was him. And he was saying, thank you for this great message. You're a wonderful role model, etc. And anyway, and so there was, like I said, kind of a lot of pushback so I listened to that message from the prophets, and I didn't get a career or work or get education, and I'm bitter about that. And now you did that and you're being glorified. It was just a really interesting post. So coming from a male perspective, I'm curious what your thoughts are, and then I'll kind of share with you maybe some of my experiences and what my thoughts are.
Yeah, it really feels like a different era hearing that quote directly from President Kimball.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What a tough scenario, because there are women that made choices not to pursue additional education or careers. But we don't seem to hear that same rhetoric from the church leaders now.
We don't.
So I don't think it's mutually exclusive to say that we should prioritize motherhood. Equally, we should be saying we should prioritize fatherhood.
Yes.
So I think that's still a true principle. But in the climate we live in, it's risky to throw those kind of comments out there just because we're very sensitive to it now.
Exactly. I thought about this because there was a lot of calls on the Instagram saying, church leaders, you need to apologize for those comments that President Kimball and President Benson made and all the hurt that those comments caused. And I thought about that because, first of all, the church very rarely apologizes. So that's probably not going to happen. But the other thing too, that the church has said is we have prophets right now for our day and age. Yeah. Those prophets were there for that day and age. And again, just like you said, it's very jarring to hear that language. But you think about when President Kimball would have said that, it would have probably in all likelihood been the late 70s. Feminism had kind of reared its head in the late 60s and into the early 70s. By then, there was a lot of pressure on the church on the Equal Rights Amendment. Sonia Johnson was becoming a big deal. And so my thinking is that quote was probably good for that time period. Yeah. Likewise, when President Benson requoted it, it's not realistic today. And again, what's really interesting is I grew up hearing that. That is the messaging that I heard as a teenager. Yet, clearly I did not take away that messaging.
Yeah.
And I remember very early on as a teenager knowing I wanted an education, knowing I wanted the ability to support myself, whether I used that education or not, that was something that I wanted for me. And I remember one time, it was right after my daughter was maybe a year or so old, year and a half old. We had just moved into a new ward. And there was another woman with a baby about the same age as mine. They had just moved into the ward. And a woman who was probably in her 40s, probably 15 years older than us. Her kids were adults at that point in time. Came up and was introducing herself, and she introduced herself to me, and she's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I can't even remember the conversation. I said, "Oh, I've got this baby. I'm an attorney. I do this, I do that." And then she turned to the woman next to me, and, "What do you do?" "Oh, I've got this baby. I'm a stay-at-home mom." And she proceeded to go, "Oh, that is so wonderful that you get to stay home with your kids," and just went on and on and on about how wonderful it was she got to stay home with her kids. And I was like, well, apparently I'm chopped liver. Now, I clearly had a choice in that moment how to react. I chose not to be offended, because I wasn't offended, because it was a decision I had prayed about. I felt good about what I was doing, and I felt like I can face the Lord and feel good about my decision. So I don't really care what her judgment is. Yeah. I think part of my ability to do that probably comes from just what you referenced a few minutes ago, my mother. My mother was a very independent thinking woman, and she grew up in a generation where she didn't even have a fraction of the opportunities I had. And I don't know what opportunities, if she'd had those opportunities, what she would have taken, what she wouldn't have taken. I do recall having a discussion with her where she said, it is so important that you are home and that you're able to be with your kids. And I certainly made a lot of sacrifices in my career to take jobs that allowed me a certain degree of flexibility, because my children and my family were a priority. So it is a hot button issue, to say the least.
And I see the calls for people wanting verbal apologies, and like you say, the church isn't prone to give apologies, but I think actions speak louder than words. And President Oakes, holding her up as a role model, I think that shows the change, cultural change.
Exactly.
Now, if women have the ability to be a stay-at-home mom, wonderful.
Yeah.
If they have the ability to work and contribute in other ways, wonderful. At the same time, we still need to have our children be the priority over our careers and even over our church callings. So.
And that was one of the points that Sister Johnson made in her talk, is she was saying family was always a priority. It did require some juggling and certain sacrifices, but family was always a priority. And so I feel like, as part of this conversation, the real heart of what her message was kind of got lost in a lot of the feedback on Instagram.
But delving into the comments section,
going down that rabbit hole. But I do think it is great to see women leaders like her. I was just tickled when they made her the Relief Society president, General Relief Society president, because I knew her history, I knew her background. Mm-hmm. And growing up, I never saw women role modeled like that. The women that I saw role modeled were all stay-at-home moms, 8 kids. I never saw a role model the way that, she is a role model. And I think it is, just as you said, so important to have a diversity of role models for young women. I've got 3 daughters, and they all have very different feelings on working and staying home and what they want to do. And I am 100% supportive of every single daughter in the choice that she makes, because she's making the choice that's right for her.
Absolutely. I look back to Sherry Dew. For me, I think there was a cultural shift seeing a single, powerful woman, and she could preach and teach.
Exactly.
And I think for me, that was a huge cultural shift within the church. So here we are 10, 20 years later.
Yeah. Well, and another thing too is we have Elder Renlund. He was a doctor. She was a lawyer, and they only had one child because she had some medical issues. And so they were concerned about bringing other children into the world. But she's also talked about how she juggled and managed that. So I like it that there's a whole variety of role models out there for young women today to go, wow, I can look up to that person and I can emulate them.
Yeah. And they can have the spirit and be righteous, temple worthy.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. You have our next story. 52 churches in 52 weeks.
This is a great feel-good story. A few years ago, I heard about David Boyce. I want to make sure I say that right.
Okay.
That he was doing a YouTube channel visiting 52 different churches over 52 weeks.
Okay. I have never heard of this. Yeah. You sent me this story and I was like, oh, this is fascinating.
So I started checking in because I want to see, when is he going to visit one of our churches?
Yes.
And how is he going to receive it? And what's he going to think? So I was just checking in every once in a while. But over the last year, he did another 52 churches in 52 weeks. But I started to see that he was really feeling something about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Actually, even all the other restoration churches. Joseph Smith founded Book of Mormon believing, even the breakaway churches that we would consider breakaway churches. But he had a really high level of respect for them. And actually, he was really respectful about every religion. So it was really fun to listen to him, just getting insights about these different faith groups. But there was something special about the Latter-day Saints for
him.
Yeah. So he started going to temple open houses and visiting wards. I think he's in Wisconsin is where he's in. And he started visiting the ward there. And he started saying, I'm attending that ward weekly. I was like, whoa, there's something happening here. And then he visited the Manti Temple. And it seems like, and he has a special thing with the Lord in his life uses the northern cardinal, a red cardinal bird, as a tender mercy, as a little...
As a God wink.
Yeah, as a God wink. And so he was having these cardinals appear to him, that would show up at different places that were help kind of leading his path. Yeah. Well, in the Manti Temple in Utah, where northern cardinals barely exist, one of the paintings on the temple in the wall had a northern cardinal, a red cardinal.
I think it was a Minerva Teichert painting from what he said. Yeah.
Yes. So he really touched him, and I think it might have helped seal the deal spiritually for him. But he returned home to Wisconsin and was ready to be baptized. So he grew up evangelical, Protestant, and so making this decision was huge for him. And the outpouring of support for him afterward has been really strong from the Latter-day Saints. But some people have come after him because they feel betrayed. But I was showing his video to my family, and even my 19-year-old daughter was like, I really like this guy's vibe.
Yeah.
Just really sincere. So I'm really delighted to see where it goes from here. So check out his YouTube channel, 52 churches in 52 weeks. Pretty easy to find.
Exactly. And I had not heard about it. And so when you sent me the link today, I was like, okay, when I go out on a walk, I'm going to listen to the video while I'm walking. And just like what you said, he's very, very, his vibe is great. He's very respectful of all other religions. He tells you, hey, these are some good things. These are some bad things. This is what I connected with. And it's about he does a video about his conversion, and it's about a 42-minute video, but it is so worth the listen. Absolutely. So we will have a link in the show notes. It's just fascinating to hear his conversion story.
Yep.
So
good man. Looking forward to following his journey.
Thank you for finding that. Okay. Next story. There was a story on the church news about mental health.
Yeah, this is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it looks like the church is jumping in on that. They provided a lot of really good resources. If you're struggling with mental health, it gives you some ideas of things you can do. I like it how it talks about connecting with someone. Yeah. We talk a lot about how connection is the cure. I would even add to that, and I didn't find anywhere in the list where it recommended professional help. So I would just add that to the list. If you're struggling with mental health, I'm a big advocate for visiting with qualified counselors or therapists. Not all counselors and therapists are created equal.
Nope.
So if one's not working out, if you don't feel like you're making progress, change.
Exactly.
But as a bishop, I recommended mental health counseling regularly because I knew I was out of my depth. Spiritually, we can encourage people to continue to pray and attend the temple and read their scriptures. But some mental health things you're not going to pray your way out of. You need tools and other help. We do need to support that with those spiritual things. But really grateful to see the church being part of that mental health awareness. Really good tips. Even in our gospel library, there's so many great resources. So I hope people become aware of them. That way, if you or a family member are struggling, you can jump in and be of good help. And there's even a section in this article that talks about some of the myths.
I loved the myths that they had. Yeah. I'll go to the last page where the myths are.
Yeah. So many times people are like, I don't know what the right thing is to say in that kind of situation. And so many times you don't need to say that.
You just need to listen.
Just be there, listen, cry with them.
Yeah. Or I like this one. This problem has lasted so long. Why aren't they better? And I think you hear that more among people who maybe haven't had to deal with a mental health issue or deal with a close loved one that has dealt with a mental health issue, to understand the majority of these problems are not solved overnight. It can be a lifelong struggle. There can definitely be, improvements, especially, if someone chooses to get medicated and they find the right combination of medicine. I really appreciate you saying that as a bishop, you recognized this is beyond my ability. Again, you realized I can stay in the lane of let's do some praying, let's do some reading of scriptures, but in a lot of circumstances that may not correct the problem. And the best way to deal with that is to go seek professional help with somebody who is trained to recognize those issues and help.
Absolutely.
And I think we're getting better at that. I'm glad that we address it a lot more. I'm glad that it's addressed in conference, that there's just not the shame and the stigma associated with it anymore.
Yeah. Who can forget Elder Holland's talk?
Exactly.
Oh man. Yeah. So good.
And, it's interesting because he hasn't really, divulged too much about his own journey. But I think reading between the lines in his talk, either this is something he's experienced or someone very close to him has experienced it, because he certainly has a very high degree of empathy for people who struggle with those issues.
Yeah, super. Very sensitive and tender about it.
Exactly. Okay, so our next article, this is another one that comes out of Women's Conference. And I wanted to take this one because, 18 months or so ago, whenever it was that they reorganized the young women, and Emily Bell Freeman came in and she put together her general board. So she's got her counselors, but then she has a general board that advises her.
And a very diverse board.
Very diverse board. We had never seen a board as diverse as this. In fact, she called on that board, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 single young women sisters. These were sisters that the majority of them were between 20 and 30. So very, very young to be called to a general women's board. I think the majority of them were returned missionaries. So they had that experience. None of them were married. They were still single. Some of them had graduated. Some of them were out of school. But what was really cool that they did at Women's Conference is they brought together these 5 sisters with Ruth Todd. And Ruth Todd was a anchor for KSL for years and years and years down in Salt Lake. And she now sits on the General Young Women's Board. And so she's one of the more seasoned sisters on the Young Women's Board. And so she sat and moderated and asked questions of these 5 young single adult sisters. And it was so fascinating to hear from these sisters. And they started out with a story. Sister Jordan Murray said she was around 14 years old when her ward was split, and she felt like she was left behind. The bishop called a new young women's president who was a 70-year-old woman.
Wow.
I'm quite impressed. And so, she's 14 years old. She's looking at this grandma who is her young women's president. And she says to her mom, she's like, oh my gosh, camp is going to be so boring with her. And her mom said, so what do you think it would take to make camp fun? And she says, a teeter-totter. So when she pulls into camp, standing there with a teeter-totter is the 70-year-old young women's president. And it was just the thawing of the ice that she needed to go, you know what? This is a good person, and she's trying to connect with us.
Cool.
And they were able to connect. And every single one of these young sisters said the very same thing. They just talked about how important it is as leaders to connect with these youth. And they gave examples of their own young women leaders and how they would send texts and call and do little notes of encouragement. And even after these young women leaders were released, as these girls got older and things went on in their life, these young women leaders were still there for them. And it's just so powerful. And I think back to my young woman leader. Now they call him for about 3 or 4 years. Her name was Janelle Heyer, and she was a perpetual young women leader. I think she was the young women's president the whole time that I was in young women's. And I still to this day have a relationship with her, and she sends me birthday cards and Christmas cards. And so
I remember every Scoutmaster young men president that I ever had.
Exactly.
They're so influential.
Exactly. And then they also go on to advise these young women leaders to say, you need to give those kids an opportunity to serve. And I think that is so cool that we are seeing more of that. Where was that at when you were a bishop? Were they transitioning to that yet? Because this is something that's come about in the last few years.
Well, I think as far as like trying to get the youth to lead and trying to get the adult leaders out of the way, I think that's been around for a long time. I was involved back when the church had scouting. I was involved in training scout leaders. And so this is one of my big pet peeves in the church, is that the adults often get in the way. And that pendulum for the young women, it seems like the young women leaders are there and they actually execute pretty much everything. They execute the planning and but the young men leaders, I see that pendulum go the other way, where like the youth are supposed to be in charge, so the adults don't help them do anything. And it just ends up they playing basketball every Wednesday night. So that pendulum can go both ways. But for me, the way I like to train this is that the adult leaders need to be like the Holy Ghost. So they need to be at the table with them in their presidency meetings with the youth. And they can be whispering into their ears warnings, ideas, things to help them along. And then get out of the way. Like the saddest thing I've ever seen is, you go to back when they had like Young Women's in Excellence or something, the adult leader would hand the class president an agenda and says, go conduct the meeting. And she wasn't involved in the planning or the execution of it. So it's the hardest thing for the adults to get out of the way. I think we have that fear of failure. And so we just need to spend more time behind the scenes, more effort behind the scenes to really train the youth like the Holy Ghost and get them out and going. So I'm pretty passionate. I could go on all night with how to train youth properly, I think.
No, I think it's really good. In fact, one of the sisters here, she pointed out that as the youth are given more opportunities to lead, they can learn from successes and failures. Failure doesn't define them, but helps them grow.
Absolutely.
And how often, whether it's with youth that we are leading or with our own kids, we want to protect them from failure without realizing, no, failure is a good thing. They're going to learn more from their failure than they are from their success. So let them try, let them fail, pick them up and patch them back together when they do.
Yeah.
And so I really liked that. And like you said, I think we're getting better and better at it. And some wards are better than others. I have a 16-year-old daughter. She lives with her dad, and in her particular ward, she had a period of time where she wasn't particularly interested in going to church, which was one of the reasons why she wanted to go move with her dad. And then she kind of decided that she missed it and swung back and wanted to get more involved. And she had a bishop that was so perceptive. He gave her 2 callings. He was like, I'm putting you in a class presidency. And he said, and you need a chorister for Sunday.
There you go. Responsibility.
And so it drew her back in. And it's been absolutely amazing to watch. Absolutely amazing to watch and watch her testimony grow from having those leaders, not only her bishop, but her young women leader, who just absolutely love her, and she knows it.
Yeah, so that's the best.
Yep. Okay. Now we've got a fun pop song that is making the rounds these days.
Yeah. So the Trimman brothers, the church has been doing so good with creating great.
Exactly.
Good to listen to music.
Fun music that's pop in nature, not just all Mormon, or not just all choir at Temple Square.
Yeah. The Lord did not cease to give inspiration about worshipful music in the 1800s. The inspiration continues. And so I'm really excited for the new hymn book and all those, but this song by the Truman Brothers, one of the Truman Brothers was in the band Diamond Rio. These are like legit Nashville stars. And the quality of the music is really good. But this song, from our recent Book of Mormon studies from King Benjamin's sermon about Are We Not All Beggars? And the song is really good. The chorus, super, super singable and catchy. But great music coming out, especially, I know they gear it toward the youth, but it works even for us Gen Xers.
It does. In fact, we will put a link in the show notes to the YouTube video. It's not a very long video. It's 3-4 minutes long, your typical video, but I watched it today. The production quality on the video was great. The song was wonderful. It was catchy, poppy. Yeah. I loved it. My only beef is sometimes I maybe this is just on my end because I'm technology inept, because I am a Gen Xer. I'm caught between that kind of technology sandwich where it was just kind of coming out when I was in my early 20s. And so I didn't grow up with it, but I've had to kind of adapt. Is I see these videos and things like that. And I'm like, I want this on my playlist so I can listen to it in my car. Like, for example, the general conference music. The only way I can listen to it is if I keep hitting like repeat on my LDS Tools library.
I think they are downloadable songs, but they don't always act like your traditional playlist.
Exactly.
So how do we get them onto our Spotify list?
Exactly. That's
there's
my one.
There's got to be a way. Maybe one of the listeners will know and show us how.
You know who's going to know? David Larson will know.
Oh, perfect.
If anybody knows, David Larson will know. I'm going to try and get him back on. I had him on in September as a guest, and you know him because from your time living in this ward. I had him on in September, but it was around the same time the whole Tim Ballard thing was breaking. And for some reason, his episode only got released on like maybe 1 or 2 platforms, not all the podcast platforms, which was unfortunate. So I told David, I said, we will recycle you and have you come back.
We look forward to hearing from him again, and maybe he can tell us how to get that good music.
Exactly. Okay, now this is a super fun story. This is a story about a Lego exhibit at BYU. And it starts off with the library special. There's a gentleman by the name of Trevor Alvord, and he is in charge of BYU Library's special collections. And he put together in 2015, apparently a Lego exhibit that was at the library. It was very successful. And after the Lego exhibit was gone, he got a telephone call from an older woman. He calls her a grandmother. And she said, where's the exhibit? And he's like, well, we ran it. It was gone. And she's like, but I didn't get a chance to bring my grandchildren to see it. I wanted to see the exhibit. And at that point in time, there were only a few things in the exhibit. There were some replicas of Book of Mormon stories being acted out and a replica of the Salt Lake Temple. And so she was just so disappointed she didn't get to see this exhibit. She was kind of scolding him. And so as such, he has put together another curated Lego exhibit that you can find at the BYU library. And apparently there is a company called Brigham Young, which does a lot of Mormon or LDS related Lego sets that you can build. And so they have this new Lego display at the BYU library. It will be there through June 30th. So if you are in Utah or if you are traveling to Utah and you have a love of Legos, you can go to the BYU library and see in their special collection exhibits the Mormon themed Lego creations. And he talks all about creating and how the Lego is just so universal because pretty much most of us all played with Legos as a kid. And if you can imagine it, you can build it out of Legos.
Well, I think it's that creation principle. We take the chaos of all these colorful bricks and then we put them into an order that's beautiful.
Exactly.
So that we're just learning.
We're just practicing for our future worlds. All right. Okay, let's get into a couple of sports stories real quick here. So Ariane and I have talked about 2 members of the church that are steeplechasers. There is a gentleman by the name of Kenneth Rooks. And then there is a female, a woman, and her name is Courtney Waymint. And both of them have an excellent, excellent shot at running in the steeplechase in the Olympics in Paris this summer. Yeah. So 4 years ago, Courtney Waymint tried out for the Olympic team. There were 3 spots. She barely missed it. She was 4th. She's pretty sad. She really wanted to go. And so she's gearing up and training again. One of her big rivals is a woman by the name of Emma Coburn. And when I say rivals, I don't mean that. I should say competitors, co-competitors.
Sounds like they're friendly competitors.
Because they are friendly competitors. And Emma has previously been to the Olympics, and Emma was expected to, have a good shot at going to Paris. Well, unfortunately, Emma broke her ankle in a meet on April 27th. So now Emma will not be in the running to go to Paris, which actually increases Courtney's chances. Yeah. But Courtney was very gracious. She got on Instagram and said, you are incredible. So much love for you. It's going to be a great comeback. So very sad for Emma that, she won't get to compete against Emma. Also, Courtney just did a podcast for the Church News, for the Church Newsroom. I have not had a chance to listen to it yet. It's on my list. Did you listen to it?
I listened to it. It's super inspiring. She's so well-spoken, super faithful. Another really great woman role model.
Exactly.
She's excellent.
So go listen to that podcast if you haven't. And as the Olympics are approaching, at least on the Taffy edition and on the Twin Sisters edition, we will keep everybody updated on members of the church who are athletes, because Ariane and I are real big Olympic fans.
Yeah, we are too. So let's go steeplechase representing.
Exactly. Way to represent on the steeplechase. And I think we have a couple of marathoners that we've already talked about that have made the cut. And so it's going to be great.
Another one is Jake Clifton, football player for Kansas State. Now he's decided to take a 2-year break to serve a mission for the church. Now, normally if this is coming out of Provo, it's not, or even any of the Utah schools, it's not that big of news, but this is Kansas State.
Yeah.
And taking a time to serve a mission. Now he is recovering from an injury, so that might help his injury recovery time too. But we're excited to see how Jay Clifton does. His stats were pretty strong with 36 tackles in 19 games. So he's a legit football player, putting it on hold to serve the Lord. So
exactly.
We'll cheer him on his mission, and then when he gets back, for more football.
And probably an interesting experience for the Kansas people, because again, you go to BYU, they leave on their missions. You don't think twice about it. Kansas State is like, what are you doing? And so good missionary opportunity right there. So, okay, well, we are running a little short on time. We have one more story, but I think what we should do is we should save that story for our Patreon segment. Okay. If you will stick around to do Patreon with us. And we will move into Mormons behaving badly, and then, of course, our favorite things. So, Mormons behaving badly. Well, what can I say? First of all, I have no new Mormons behaving badly this week. That is actually a really amazing, great thing. I do have a Mormon who we have been covering that has, they behaved badly. Now they're on trial. It would be the Chad Daybell trial that is currently going on. I think most of us here in Idaho are probably following it pretty religiously. This is a week where all the crazy came out again. We heard a lot of the crazy when Lori was on trial a year ago. And when I talk about the crazy, I mean the blessings that he would give, the castings where they were trying to cast evil spirits out of people.
The portals
where they were rating people light and dark. All of that was on full display this week in the trial. And it is, I don't know about you, but as an active member of the church, it is really, really hard to listen to.
Yeah. Well, you take something that's so beautiful, like blessings, and the inspiration we feel when we're giving blessings, and then to see it used to manipulate people and to lead to evil things. It's just, I just feel this huge sense of betrayal about it. I look at, like, Chad Daybell looks like a guy that could be in your ward.
He does.
And, but to just just what it led to, the death of spouses and children, just shocking. So, but we're following Brother Nate Eaton.
Yes.
On East Idaho News. Yes. I follow his day, every lunch hour. I have to catch up on all of his minute by minute updates.
Minute by minute.
And then my wife and I will watch his courtroom on YouTube.
His Courtroom Insider. Yep. In fact, you're stealing one of my favorite things I was going to talk about tonight. No, that's okay. Because I talked about this as a favorite thing a little while ago, or probably last year when Lori was on trial, that Nate Eaton, he is a member of the church. He works for East Idaho News and really one of the news agencies that really broke this story. He's in the courtroom every day. He gives live updates every day on East Idaho News. And then he does a program called Courtroom Insider every night where he goes through the happenings of the day and gives his opinion on it. And he does an amazing, amazing job. I was hoping with the trial being televised that I would get to put it on in the background and follow it more. But I have just been so stinking busy at work that I haven't been engaged in projects where I could really have it on in the background. So I've really had to kind of rely on his summaries. But the prosecution is still putting on their case. There is, of course, lots of evidence that we heard from last year, but I'm also surprised the amount of new evidence that is coming out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that a year ago, Lori Vallow, I think, was convicted.
She was convicted the Friday before Mother's Day.
Yeah. And now we still have the prosecution. The defense hasn't even begun. So this one's going on much longer.
It is. It is. Yeah. And I'm fairly engaged with it. I anticipate when the defense starts, because Lori didn't do a defense, that I'm probably going to get even more engaged at that point in time because John Pryor, his lawyer, has hinted at potentially the children testifying. And
that should be fascinating.
I'm very interested to see what the kids have to say. So, in fact, one of the things that came out today that I didn't even realize, because I don't remember this coming out last week, when Chad ordered Tammy's headstone, he did not put his name on the headstone.
I couldn't believe that either. That showed that there was a disconnect.
Exactly. Wow. And so I think that was probably maybe the first bells and whistles that went off for some of his family members to go, he's not on the headstone. And again, I mean, I cannot wrap my head around where the kids are at, because if my mom died, my dad got remarried 2 weeks later and didn't put his name on the headstone. Yeah. Something would just seem very off to me.
So many red flags.
Oh. All right. Well, let's move on to favorite things. So before we talk about our favorite things, I have a drink, a concoction, another beverage. This is not
beverage night.
This is beverage night. This is not a post-up beverage. This is a different beverage. If you have been on TikTok or Instagram or anything lately, there is this new trend going around where you go to Sonic, you order yourself a Dr. Pepper at Sonic, and for an add-in, you tell them to put pickles in there. Oh. And you know us as an LDS culture, we love a good soda beverage combination. That is kind of our thing. That's why they have all these soda shops in Utah. So tonight, my husband and my kids were out, and I said, "Bring me home a Dr. Pepper Zero," because I don't want the sugar. I don't like drinks with sugar. I said, "Bring me home a Dr. Pepper Zero. We are going to try this trend tonight." So
I've seen this on TikTok. I'm excited to try
it. I prepared for you a beverage that has Dr. Pepper Zero in it. I put some sliced pickles in it, and we are going to try it. So cheers, bottoms up. Let's see what this tastes like.
Wow. The pickle comes as the aftertaste.
The pickle does come as the aftertaste. That is a very unique flavor. Now, I like pickles, so I don't hate this.
No, I could do this.
Okay. I see why people like it.
It's refreshing, too.
It is. That you would never think to put pickles in your Dr. Pepper, but that actually is really not that bad. Now I want to try it.
You got to try it, folks.
Now I want to try it in my Diet Coke, because I'm not Ariane's a huge Dr. Pepper fan. I'm going to have to make Ariane try this and see what she thinks. Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting.
pickle flavor Dr. Pepper.
Pickle flavor Dr. Pepper. Who knew?
Wow.
Okay, so what did you bring tonight to share with me as your favorite thing?
Well, this is something that my family has found at Costco.
Okay.
These are probiotic strawberry yogis.
Oh, really? So it's got your probiotics in it?
Yeah, it's like a little gummy, strawberry gummy, but with a little coating of probiotic yogurt on it.
Oh.
And they're just really simple.
I have
really
never
delicious.
seen these at Costco.
Yeah, they're usually kind of up front by all those other terrible snacks.
I know, probably because I'm always looking at the Girl Scout little Thin Mint things that they have. Okay, so if you're online, they're little
cubes. They did get a little warm in my truck, so they did some of them melt together. But little cubes coated with yogurt. But
okay, those are yummy.
Yeah,
I would totally eat those as a snack.
Yeah, I brought a couple extra for you.
Oh well, thank you.
These are delightful little snacks. So.
Oh, and only 80 calories. That's not bad.
So there you go.
That's not bad, and something healthy
snack.
So
keep that gut biome perfect.
Love that. Thank you so much. And like I said, I mentioned earlier I was going to share Nate Eaton's Courtroom Insider again, just for anybody who wants to follow along with the Chad and Lori Daybell trial. So. Yeah. Let me finish eating this before I wrap things up here so I'm not sitting here talking with my mouth full. Okay, well, that about wraps it up for us tonight. Robert, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, you've been a delightful guest. Second, I'm not sure I've ever had a bishop or former bishop on the podcast. I know Kurt was a bishop. Yeah. I don't really count Kurt. Sorry, Kurt. But I don't think any of my other guests, I don't think I've ever had that perspective before. And also, I didn't mention this to our TWIM audience earlier. Your wife, Jessica, is sitting here in the room. I've had my first live audience for a TWIM podcast. I love it. So it's been so nice of you guys to join us tonight. We appreciate that. Finally, we'd like to thank again our sponsor, Postum, for sponsoring This Week in Mormons. I've been sipping my little chocolate Postum all night here. It really is delicious. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can reach out at contact@thisweekinmormons.com. You can find us on Facebook. I know you are on Facebook. You comment a lot on some of our stuff on Facebook, which is fun. We are on the Instagram. I will put our favorite things on the Twin Sister Instagram tonight. And then, of course, there is our Twitter feed, although I'm still not sure how active our Twitter feed is. But our Facebook is pretty active, and the Instagram that Ariane and I post on. So you're going to stick around, and we're going to do a little Patreon segment for our listeners who are Patreon subscribers. We would just encourage anybody who wants to support us and wants to have some extra content to join at Patreon. You can pledge any amount you want. We just encourage people maybe $2-3 a month. Pledge that support, help us just keep all of our equipment up and running. So I'm looking forward to having continuing this conversation in Patreon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Twin Nation.